This video will go over clipping masks. A clipping mask is used to take one layer and use it to clip away parts of another layer. So you can see that here in my example where I have the mask layer, this cute little guy, and the clipping layer as this shape. And I'm going to use the clipping layer to cut away parts of the mask. So the end result looks like this here on the right-hand side. So to create a clipping mask, you'll need two layers. First, let's create the mask layer. Sorry, the clipping layer. This is the shape layer that I'm creating, and it will be used to clip away parts of the image. And the second thing we need is the image. So I'm going to go File, Place Embedded. And I will choose one of these stock images that I downloaded earlier. And click Place. So placing is a two-step process. The first step is to get the image inside. The second step is to scale it and position it. So I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so we can see what's going on here. And I will accept it by pressing the check mark. So creating a clipping mask is rather simple in some ways. Um, you just have to be aware of a few things. First thing is the clipping layer must be below the mask. So they must be sitting perfectly side by side in the layers panel with the mask layer on top of the shape layer. The other thing to be aware of, just so you don't get confused, is make sure that your image is completely covering the clipping layer. So the mask needs to be completely covering it to avoid any weird things. And to create the clipping mask, it's as simple as clicking a button. You can find this button in a few places, so let's check it out. In the layer menu on top, create clipping mask. And there you have it. The clipping layer is used to cut away parts of the image. In the layer menu, that create clipping mask has now been replaced by release clipping mask. So you can do this to undo the process. So I will click to show you that the image is still there. We didn't actually lose any pixels. And that's the beautiful thing about these clipping masks and a lot of tools inside Adobe Photoshop is they are non-destructive. So even though we made a bunch of changes and deleted some of these pixels, they weren't actually deleted. So let me create the clipping mask again. And you can see in the layers panel, the layer with the image is still there. And instead of being erased, what happened is it got indented and this little arrow appears. So this arrow is the sign for a clipping mask, and it's telling us that this mask is being applied to this layer below it. And the great thing about that is you can now work with these layers independently. So now with the Move tool, I have Auto Select on. So every time I click, I'm going to click on the layer and drag it around. So it's automatically selecting the layers uh, that I've clicked on, and I'm able to move it around with the Move tool. I could also go to my Free Transform tool, and I could continue to work with this layer independently of the clipping layer. So if I want to resize it, reposition it, even rotate it, and it'll still stay bound inside of this clipping layer. Furthermore, you can also work with the clipping layer selected. However, if you want to do that, auto select might cause you some trouble. So you might want to turn off auto select, and you must select a layer manually inside the layers panel. And now you could click and drag to move around the clipping layer. So you'll see that if I move the clipping layer away from the mask, eventually it's no longer being covered. But this is just showing you that you could work with these layers independently. I could also go to my Free Transform tool and transform the clipping layer however I want. Make it bigger, make it smaller, rotate it, and so on. And quickly, just to end this video, I'll show you the other places where you can find this create clipping mask. So the first place is in the layer menu, like we saw before, create and release your clipping mask. You can also right click on the layer. Just make sure you're clicking on the mask layer, and you can find create or release clipping mask. You can find it in the layers panel menu. Again, just make sure the mask layer is active. And the last place, which is a little sneaky, but lots of people like the shortcut, is you hold the Alt button. So if you hold the Alt button on the keyboard and you click at this point just in between the layers, that's a quick shortcut to get the create or release clipping mask. So nice little shortcut, and that's it for the introduction to clipping masks.